Kayla Ancrum, everyone. We're super happy to have her here today. She's just got such a stellar experience as an author, and she's just a brilliant speaker as well, which you will see. She's the author of the young adult thriller, The Wicker King, and the YA romance, The Weight of the Stars, as well as the contemporary thriller, Darling. She will be speaking to you all about her writing process and the different avenues that you can use when choosing to publish a book. Kayla is a Chicago native, and she's passionate about diversity and representation in young adult fiction. A bit about me, I'm Ishri Maranwe. I will be your host today. I'm representing Dweebs Global. We are an international free mentorship organization, and one of the areas we provide mentorship in is writing. So if you write a book and you need help writing that query letter or a synopsis, if you want to know how to go about the agenting process or anything else, we help you with all of that for free. We have stellar people willing to check your query letter, check your synopsis, help you through the agenting process. We have more information on our website. I'll drop the contact as well in the chat. And yeah, turning it over to Kayla, I'm super excited about this. We have Dweebs live event sessions every weekend, and they're about topics from recruiting in Fortune 500 companies to comedy to writing. So welcome, and we are so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I would just like to say thank you to everybody else for your patience. I was having a bit of technical difficulties today, but gladly I'm here to present to all of you. So my name is Kayla. I am the writer of The Wicker King. I write predominantly young adult fiction, and I've always written novels. So I'd like to talk to you about fiction and novels. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I would like to show you. It's going to be really detailed. I'm going to be cramming a lot of information into a small amount of space. But there will be questions at the end, and there will be opportunities for deeper delves on some of the topics in some later videos. So before we get started, I just wanted to say that this is about fiction books. Generally, for nonfiction, there are a couple different paths that you can take to get what you want, and there are a little bit of different expectations. But if you are interested in writing for middle grade, children's, young adult, or adult fiction, then the information that you need is what I'll be presenting today. So first things first, before you get started writing a book, before you even, think about what your plot is going to be, what your history is going to, or what your character is going to be like, or anything like that, it's important to do some research. I always start out doing research on my books because it's important to kind of know everything about the arena that you're stepping into and what your audience is like and what their expectations are when you get there. So first, research the history of your chosen genre. It's important to know, especially for like romance and historical fiction, what things other people have put out before you get started. It's also really important to read other books that are similar to your idea. A lot of authors really want to have their book stand out and not to be like all the other books that are out there, but knowing exactly what books, you are similar to yours, you'll know what your audience has read before they were reading yours. When you have the ability to look at previous works that are similar to yours, you can read reviews of those books and you can know what readers liked and what readers didn't like. If you know what readers like, you know what things that you should probably keep within your genre, and what readers didn't like, you know what they might be craving or they might be wanting for the future, or you might be able to stop yourself from disappointing them. Also, all of your readers are experts on what it is that you're writing. If you're writing a vampire novel, you best believe that your readers have read tons of vampire novels, and they're coming to your book with that years and years of experience. So doing the research to make sure that your work is, well researched, really well drafted for what people would be expecting for the genre, is important, because you're not disrespecting your reader in regards to their expectations of the quality that they're requesting. Then also in regards to kind of like researching what you're going to write based on popularity, a lot of people see like a wave of popularity. Like, for example, let's stick with vampires. During the Stephenie Meyer Twilight vampire wave, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, vampires are popular, I have to write a vampire book. The thing about publishing is that popularity of certain genres and certain topics shifts really fast, and shifts unpredictably. So it's way better to just kind of write what you're interested in, write what you like, as opposed to chasing trends, because chasing trends rarely pans out. Generally, the publishing process from beginning to end, at the fastest I've ever seen it for traditional publishing, is like 2 years. So if you start out writing a vampire novel, by the time you're done, everyone's like, oh, I'm so tired of vampires, and it'll be a lot harder for you to sell your pitch. And then For each genre and each age range, there are different basic requirements for your word count. So before you sit down and you're like, I'm going to write a 400-page middle grade novel, spending some time looking and learning that usually middle grade novels are like maybe 250 pages will make it a little bit easier for you to, break out into the industry, get an agent, have people be willing to sit and read your work. So it's important to actually put in the same kind of research that you put into writing reports. The next thing, which is probably my favorite thing to talk about, is topics about what to write. There are a lot of people who, start out and they are like, I really, really want to put my ideas to fiction, and I really want to, spend some time working on long fiction, but I just have no idea, what to write. I think a lot of the time, the longer that you spend time thinking about your ideas, it'll be easier to kind of just like hop from idea to idea. But in the very beginning, sometimes thinking about these specific things make it a little bit easier to get started. So writing what you'd like to read. I personally write young adult fiction, but I love reading middle grade. But I know that I'm not the best middle grade writer yet. So in the future, I will write what I like to read. But for some people, they know that they love science fiction. They know they want to write science fiction. So starting at looking up science fiction ideas is the best option. The second thing is writing what you wish was available to read. I grew up in, 1999, 2003, that was my, young adult era. There were not a lot of books about LGBT culture. There were not a lot of books about Black experience. There were not a lot of books about, having ADHD or being disabled in any way, shape, or form. So me and a lot of the people that I wind up on panels with literally sat there and were like, I want to write what I wish that I had. And in certain circumstances, you have to, pull up your bootstraps and create the things that will make it easier for people who are coming after you. So that's another noble pursuit to take in regards to what to write. Writing about your life experiences is also a really powerful thing to choose to write about, whether it's writing contemporary and you're writing something like, a book that's directly about your teenagehood or your, middle grade lifestyle or anything like that. Or if you want to take a staple of your cultural history and expand upon it fantastically and make, a fantasy about where you're from, that's also a really good starting point. Or you can just write about your personal fantasies. You can just, think about, it would be really cool if ... and start from there. But those are some good jumping off points if you're a bit, worried about coming up with something that people will. So the second most important thing is paying attention to organizing your book. I think it was, what's his name? The guy who wrote Game of Thrones. He did this amazing panel where he talked about, types of writing, and he described the two different types of writers as gardeners and architects. You might have heard plotters and pantsers, but I like gardeners and architects because I think this really describes what it is like to write a book. Gardeners, or writers who identify as gardeners, are the kind of writers who start a book and they start with, nothing, and they kind of just let the story take them where they want to go, and they just write themselves into a corner, write themselves out. And then when they get to the end of the book, they get to the natural end. And there are people like myself who require a little bit more stability, and they are architects. I do incredibly detailed drafts. I do lots of, plans, plotting, making sure that the base of my house of the book is built before I begin anything else. And I think that both of those ways to write are absolutely valid. They produce works of, similar quality. It really just depends on what you're comfortable with. But I do think it's important to have a concrete plan, regardless of whether you're a gardener or an architect, because it helps keep things on track. And it makes it more likely that you'll finish. Regardless of whether you like to, just kind of let your work take you where you want to go, I think it's very important that you write your plot from beginning to end. I think it's important that you know where your story is going, regardless of whether you do a detailed plot like me, or just kind of like a, they start here, they end here, some stuff happens in the, middle, and it's going to be a happily ever after. I think it's important that you know where you're going. And writing your characters and what they're like. Not necessarily so that you have to rely on what you originally created, but more so you can track their character development, because it's important for your readers to be able to spend time with characters that grow and change, and making sure that you knew what your character was like at the beginning and can see where you're going at the end is really important just for maintaining the quality of the general. So one of the things that it's become very difficult for authors to get is feedback. Sometimes your community isn't receptive, or you're not somebody who makes friends very easily, or you don't really know who to turn to share your work. I do think it's important that you get some early feedback before you go on to submit to agents, submit to publishers, because it's important that you know where your quality is. When I was first writing, I started writing books when I was 13. They were terrible. They weren't good. I did start early, but they were all terrible. In order to know they were terrible, I would force my friends, my middle grade friends, to read the books that I read or that I wrote, and they told me the things that I needed. They told me the things that they didn't like, and I grew from those experiences. When I got to high school, the teachers were actually more willing to read than my friends, because everybody was busy. We had finals. We were trying to apply to colleges. Nobody wants to read book stuff. But my teachers, who were invested in my growth and development as a person, my growth and development as a writer, as a student, as somebody who's interested in learning, were really there to kind of support me, and were willing to spend time outside of work to read my stuff. So if you're currently in school, reach out to your teachers, reach out to your professors. You'd be surprised how willing they are to care about your work. Then the next thing that I think is really important is online writing community. There are very many, and each one is going to fit everybody differently, so it's worth it to kind of poke around and see what's available. The first one is a Scribophile. It's just kind of a community that is specifically designed for people who want to learn about whether their writing is good, and you're specifically going there to get that content. My second is Archive of Our Own, and it is my favorite. It currently has the most general feedback on original fiction that you post. It is a fan fiction writing website, but because a lot of the people who are on there are very active on the site, you're more likely to get immediate feedback and immediate community around building yourself up as a writer. Then before we had Archive of Our Own, we had a horrible place called fanfiction.net. The creator of fanfiction.net also made a secondary website called fictionpress.com, or I think, fictionpress.com, and it is specifically for people who are writing online fiction. So before we had all the rest of these writing sites, and we were splintered between the factions of fanfiction.net, LiveJournal, and Zanga, and all of those ancient websites, we had Fiction Press. And the people who've been on there and who continue to post on there have been there for years. I'm talking 20 years. So if you're looking for somebody who's been writing for a really long time, and you're looking for that community and looking to find people who, are long time, non-professionals who can talk about your work, Fiction Press is a great place to start. Booksy is like Scribophile, but a different one, in case you just don't want to use that platform. Everybody's really into visuals. So that's available as well. And then probably a mid favorite of mine is Wattpad. Wattpad is an interesting company though. You shouldn't post more than 25% of your work on Wattpad, and no more than 50% of your book if you're intending to sell that book on any of the other places, specifically to protect your rights as an author and the ownership of your work and your ability to sell it. But Wattpad specifically is a company that everybody knows for, people writing fan fiction and people writing, original stories and stuff like that. They're actually a media company, and they generate their income from looking at trends in people's fiction and what people are reading, and then selling that information about what the trends are to the media. So if everybody suddenly is interested in stories about fairies, they aggregate that data and then sell that, and that's how they make their money, and why you can write on there for free. But because they have that relationship with your work, the rights to your work is slightly different than the rights that you'd have on Archive of Our Own or Fiction Press, and it's worth it to keep some of your stuff back as opposed to giving it all Wattpad. Another option is you can consider doing a book trade with another writer for mutual feedback. Early on, when I was first about to get started querying the first publishable quality book that I wrote, I went on Craigslist and I found another writer, and we traded books. I took hers, she took mine. We edited each other's books and then sent them back. And, you know, we were both in positions where there wasn't like a vibrant, you know, online writing culture that I was really into. And I had just graduated, so I didn't have access to my teachers and my professors. And it was a really good, you know, like middle of the road option when, you know, you're in a pinch. Another thing that I think is really important to consider is authenticity readers, or you might have heard them described as sensitivity readers. When you are writing perspectives that are outside of your own perspective, your ability to see things that might be offensive, things that might be inaccurate, things that, you know, you may have researched that might not be as up to date is way more difficult. It's not so much that you're, you know, a bad person who's trying to write work that hurts people, because I know we're all trying our best. But it's important to know that when somebody has a different life experience than yours, they have kind of like a little insider's pass to knowing what is important to make sure that you don't put in your books. So I think that that's really worth, you know, considering. And, you know, just in case it was something that you're, you know, you think that you kind of don't need to, you know, consider, even when doing research, your ability to judge what references and what resources are valid resources and are quality resources and are vetted resources is still less than somebody whose life experience that genuinely is. So it's worth it to pay them, and it's worth it to find some good ones. All right, so now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the professional part. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the different types of publishing. There are three. Generally speaking, there is self-publishing, indie publishing, which is small independent publishing houses, and traditional publishing. I think that most people are most familiar with self-publishing and traditional publishing. So for self-publishing, you don't need an agent. You're responsible for all editing, marketing, art, printing, and hosting of your book if you happen to do a, like, you know, online store or a sale, or, you know, you have an ebook copy or for self-publishing, there's a large upfront investment. However, you get to keep most of the profits. So, you know, it might cost $500 for you to get like really quality like cover art and really quality like framing for that cover art and text and stuff like that. It might cost another $500 for you to get like a marketing plan for your book typed up and, you know, vetted by a professional. And it might cost an additional $3,000 for you to, you know, just print out all the books that you're about to sell. But generally, you get to keep 80 to 100% of the profits. Amazon, you have to give them a percentage. If you're another, you know, printing press, you have to give them a percentage. And then you just take home, you know, the whole enchilada. For indie publishing, occasionally you'll need an agent, but most of the time there's also no agent required. You are also responsible for marketing. With an indie publisher, they're small. They, you know, it's usually a team of like very enthusiastic, inspiring people who want to publish a really specific type of book. But they don't have a lot of money to put into it because they are a small business. So you, a lot of the time, will be responsible for, you know, doing your marketing above and beyond what the publisher will offer you. Generally, in regards to advances, you'll get like a lower advance. An advance is an amount of money that a publisher gives you with the expectation that you will sell above that amount of money. So when people are like, I outsold my advance, they're excited because the publisher gave them $15,000 and they sold $15,000 worth of books, and now people want to still work with them because they know that they're a profitable investment. So with indie publishers, as they are a small business, they usually give lower advances or no advance. For a low advance, I'd say 500 is the lowest I've seen, 5,000 is the highest I've seen for an indie publisher. When you get no advance, a lot of the time they will boost the percentage of the amount of money that you will get from the sale of your book. So generally I've seen like 40%, you'll get the agency, or the publisher will get like 60, or vice versa. If you have no advance, you'll maybe get, you know, 75% of your profits, you know, 60% of your profits, but it usually is like a larger chunk. For traditional publishing, you need an agent. You cannot open those doors without an agent. And the reason that that's a thing is because of the like massive bottleneck in the industry in regards to people being able to get to a certain place. So there are roughly 30 million people in North America who are trying to publish books right now. There are only 1,649 now literary agents who represent English language works in North America. That is a massive, massive disparity of numbers. And then for publishers, there are a lot more, but there's still way, 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 way less than there are the amount of agents. So what agents do is they filter out for quality, and then they send that still massive amount to publishers. So it's really important that you acknowledge the value of that and understand that they're not gatekeeping your work because they want to keep you out of publishing personally, but more that there's just so much, and that, you know, they're really looking for a specific kind of quality. When you are with traditional publishing, there are some benefits, there are some drawbacks. The benefits are you get to kind of just chill and stuff happens to your work. The drawbacks are you don't get a certain, you know, a percentage that's as huge as self-publishing. Your publishing house will handle all of your editing, marketing, art, printing, and hosting. You don't have to worry about that at all. You just sit there, give them your work, and then they come back to you and they're like, this is the stuff we've done. And you're like, yay. So it's a much more relaxing experience. You get a medium to a large advance in comparison to indie publishing. I think the smallest I've seen for like a large traditional publisher is $5,000 per book, all the way up to like millions of dollars, depending on who you are and how fancy you are and all that stuff. And for me personally, I'm what they call like a mid-list author. Like my work gets, you know, national distribution, you can buy it in stores, but I'm not, you know, like V. Schwab or, you know, J.K. Rowling or Stephen King or anything like that. And my advance was 30 grand for 2 books. Unlike, you know, self-publishing, there's no upfront investment. You just give them your work and then they give you money. And then you sit there and then later you get more money. So it's one of those things where it's very, very difficult in regards to the work on the like the front end, but on the back end you wind up having to do like less work at the latter stages of the book publishing process. Whereas with self-publishing, you do, you know, the work of writing your book, and then the most difficult part of that is doing all the rest of the things that is required for publishing a book. Now, personally, I do have to say, even though there's a lot of people who have opinions about which type of publishing is worth more and is more fancy or, you know, whatever, but I personally think that when it comes to these 3 different types of publishing, which type of publishing works best for you is whichever works best for the work that you're writing, what kind of book it is, what stage you are in it. For me personally, when I was publishing my first book, I was in college and I didn't have any money. I was physically unable to self-publish because I didn't have the capital to make that happen. So for me, traditional publishing was basically my only option. Indie publishing, if I wasn't able to get traditional publishing, but traditional publishing was literally the only thing I could afford. So for some people, self-publishing is what's best for them. There are a couple of authors who traditional published their first year, and then we're like, you know what? I have a big enough audience. People know me. People like me. I'll just put my books on Amazon, and they're just raking in just thousands and thousands of dollars every month because self-publishing worked for them. They already had that audience. They, you know, had the connections that they made with people who do good cover art. They had friends to look at their work. They were friends with some editors. You know, they had the capital from their first book that they did traditional publishing to put into the editing process and paying for a, you know, personal assistant and paying for PR for themselves. It really, really, you know, it depends on what works best for you. For indie publishing, because I know a lot of people are like, well, you know, what would be best for there? I have a friend who specifically writes fiction about people who are having romantic relationships who have this specific disability that she has, and she's physically handicapped, and she's creating those books for that really, really specific audience. And an indie publisher who specifically wants to publish work that is by people who have disabilities picked her up, and it's perfect for her because people who are looking for that specific kind of work can choose independent publishers who will have a direct line to the people who are interested in the books that they're publishing. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper into each. So for self-publishing, it's really important to pay to have your book professionally edited for content and for copy editing. The amount of self-published books that kind of just went to shelves that have typos and issues with the formatting that, you know, the authors maybe 5 years later look back and they're just like so just horrified that they put this out is just uncountable number. So it's absolutely worth it to put that out there. It's very important to pay for genre appropriate cover art. this sounds like, you're putting like a ton of money into it, but if if you're savvy, you can find stuff that isn't, thousands of dollars to pay for. I have friends who have done commissions for cover art for, like $150 to $300, or, people who looked up, photography that's open, like Creative Commons, and then messaged the person who created that work and said, I would like to purchase, exclusive rights to it. And it was $50 because it was like one photograph or something. So it's less about paying the most amount of money for the best cover art, and it's more about knowing what is appropriate within your genre as cover art. Your audience is looking for books that remind them of books that they've liked in the past. If you do research on what similar books to yours have chosen for their cover art and select a cover artist that provides a similar aesthetic, you'll find that readers will flock to it even without reading the back of your book. And the goal isn't, just to sell them on the cover. It's to get them to where they are at the point where they can read the back of your book because they're interested. It's also important to avoid book mill companies, so places that just, take your thousands of dollars and they're like, I want $5,000 to publish, 10,000 copies of your book. And they have no interest whatsoever in creating like quality printing or giving you any support. There are people who have had horrific experiences and they write about it online. They will keep lists of people who have harmed the writing community. And it's really important that you search out what those lists are so people don't take you for a ride, because what amount of work that goes into writing a book, the years that people spend writing books, you don't deserve to have, your stuff taken advantage of. You don't deserve to have the work that you created wasted in this way. So make sure that you protect yourself. Also, if you're self-publishing, it's important that you draft a marketing plan. Yes, you can just kind of, throw your book on Amazon and cross your fingers, but there are people who are looking for what it is that you're writing, trying to figure out where they are, what kind of stores they're interested in, reaching out to, like independent bookstores, doing, interviews with blogs, making sure that people know who you are, spending some time, making sure that you have a good website and that your social media is, up to date and, written in a way that targets your audience is really, really important. And, there are some self-published authors who didn't even do traditional publishing first, who spent some time on a really good marketing plan, who just like, basically are best sellers of self-publishing. And if they can do it and they can put in the work, you can absolutely look to what they've, put together to make something that might work for you. For indie publishing is very similar to traditional publishing in the ways that you access it. So some of the things might have some overlap. It's important that you have an idea of which indie publishers are out there. And approximately, I'd say at this point, maybe 20 years ago, there was this guy who created this website called querytracker.net. And querytracker.net is probably the best resource I have ever been given for publishing. I actually was referred to there by an agent who I queried, who said that, this was if I was going to use only one website, this is a website you use. And what it is a aggregate of all of the literary agents that exist that do English language publishing and all of the indie publishing houses that exist as well. They have ways that you can filter out, what genre, what age range, I think, so that you can help find who you're looking for. When you're looking for indie publishers, finding a publisher that specifically publishes the kind of book that you're writing is really important. It's a waste of your time and a waste of their time if you're publishing like children's picture books and they're trying to publish like adult, hard-hitting horror mysteries. Like, save yourself the heartache of receiving a rejection. Also, Medium just put out an article called The Big List of Indie Publishers and Small Presses that goes into detail about what the presses are looking for, what they're famous for publishing. So between Query Tracker and this list, you'll be able to find somebody that you're looking for. One of the things that's really important for both indie publishing and traditional publishing is to have something that's called a query letter. A query letter is a one-page long document describing your book. I'll go into what a query letter looks like and how you can write one a little bit later, but it's important that you have one. You also need to create samples of your book in these very specific little, chunks. So 10 pages, one chapter. 30 pages, 3 chapters, 100 pages, 50% of your book, and a full draft. When you are applying to indie publishers or agents, they will ask, I want a query letter, I want 10 pages, I want your book synopsis. Or I want a query letter, I want a full 50% and your book synopsis. Or just, I want the first 3 pages. Like they ask for it a lot. So if you're going to be applying to a lot of them in a short amount of time, having those easy access is very important. And then a book synopsis. This will be everything that happens in your book. No spoilers, held back, just the book itself from beginning to end. Talk a little bit about your character's development, talk a little bit about the actual plot. Usually they're no longer than 1.5 pages maximum. If you get into 2, you have to be writing like historical fiction or something else where it requires for you to put a lot of small details. But for everybody else, generally try not to go above a page or a page. So for traditional publishing, you need an agent for several reasons. I mentioned the bottleneck and the amount of people who are, trying to publish books right now. That's probably the most important one, but there are a lot of other reasons that agents are important. First of all, they help you negotiate your contract. Making sure that you can get the best deal possible, the most money possible from a traditional publisher is what your agent does for you. They also can open certain doors. Agents have personal relationships with editors. Since there are so little of them, and some people have been in the industry for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years, they meet them at events, they form personal friendships with them. You might get an agent who goes to dinner parties with the editor of your dreams. Like it's one of those things where like a lot of it is a small industry, so people know each other. So it's important to understand that they have those connections. Also, your agent can open doors for you for adapting your work. Occasionally, your publisher will give the rights to film and TV and audiobooks and all of that stuff to your agency. Having an agent that is able to make connections with like a film agent or can also represent you as that kind of agent makes it easier for you to get certain things. And they also act as like a pre-editor. My agent is Eric Smith, and he's lots and lots of fun. Whenever I write something new or I have a new idea or I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, I want to write about ghosts, just text him or email him and be like, do you think a ghost book would be profitable? And he goes, no, Kayla, don't do that. And I'm like, okay, like having a relationship with somebody who is able to provide you that immediate emotional support and provide you, feedback on your work and to look over your proposals is a relationship that has so much value that I can't even really put into words what kind of support that is to have. So just like indie publishing, relying on Query Tracker is really important as well. It gives you a list of agents, but it also gives you information on them. So it'll tell you, this agent likes books that are longer than 50,000 words, but not longer than 150,000 words. And it has like a parabola of like all of the people that they've responded to who have given them a book that's that long. Or this agent says that they really, really like fantasy, but they seem to only be asking for full requests from people whose fantasy has a lot of science fiction elements in it. Knowing that kind of stuff about, agents before you submit to them, very important, very cool, and it can really help. So what I think it's important to do when you're making a list of all of the agents is to list your top 50 agents. When you segregate the ones that you want, even though I said there's 1,600, for the specific book that you're writing, there's probably only about maybe like 200 that are specifically looking for exactly what it is that you are trying to bring to the table. Of that 200, find your top 50. Start from the bottom, people who you're least interested in, and work your way up to people who are most interested in. While you are querying, you will learn things about how to query agents. Your first query will not be as good as your, 20th query or your 50th query or something like that. My query letter changed and changed and changed as I was sending it out. And I think by the time I got to the end, when I was, about ready to send it to my like top 10 agents, and I was so close, I'd gotten a bunch of full requests from other people, I was ready and I knew that my letter was good. And I didn't waste those opportunities, those early opportunities on, sending out a query letter that didn't represent my work as best as it would be able to. So then I kind of wanted to talk about the process. So what happens is the agent receives your query letter and they're like, this is the best ghost book I've ever read. I want to read, the first, 50 pages. And then you give them the first 50 pages and they're like, this is amazing. I need to know what happens at the end. And they request a full manuscript or full draft. They read your draft. They're like, yes, I want to work with you. They send you a contract. You sign your contract. Industry standard is 15% of your earnings. So everything that I earn, regardless of what it is, Eric gets 15% of my money, and it is worth it. So, you know, generally people just sign on that. They don't, a lot of times they don't negotiate it. Then your agent will approach publishers for you. They'll send them an email and be like, hey, so I saw, you know, that you were talking about Supernatural last night on Twitter. I have this book and it's about ghosts. Are you interested? And they'll, you know, read the book and see if they're actually interested in representing you. Your publisher will send you a contract. They'll break down how much money you get for each, you know, thing, whether it's, you know, for audiobook rights or for hardcover versions of your book or paperback covers of your book and everything. And then you get your advance, you get your money, and then your book gets edited for content and copy edited, and they start, you know, chugging those, you know, huge wheels of industry to make sure that your book gets to shelf appropriately. There are no typos, cover art is good, your marketing plan is decent, people know are, they'll talk about you on social media, they'll, you know, handle all of that stuff for you. And all you do is just sit there and you just wait for all of that stuff to happen. Occasionally they'll reach out and be like, oh, you know, market yourself a little bit, or you have to go to do, you know, a panel in a different state and have people meet you when you're debuting and stuff like that. But it's very much kind of like a way more laid back at the back end process than self-publishing, which is a little bit more laid back at the front end. And it's really, really elaborate at the back end. So I wanted to talk to everybody about query letters. Query letters are probably harder to write than writing the actual book. They are such a dense, condensed understanding of what it is that you're bringing to the table. You have to sell the agent on your book. You have to sell the agent on yourself. You have to sell the fact that you can write in the query letter. Otherwise, they'll see that you know, have a lot of typos and see that you don't have a cool line that, you know, leads them into it. They'll read your plot and be like, that doesn't make sense. And they won't even open your pages. So making a query letter that is really, really good is really important. First thing is it should be single-spaced. These are usually sent by email. Not very many agents take paper requests anymore because they used to build up these ginormous piles of paper and just kind of panically sort through them. So now it's a lot easier to just kind of like have your email set in a way where it organizes your query letters. So it should be written like a very polite introductory email. And it should not exceed 3 typed paragraphs. So I would say an email the size maybe 75% of a, you know, printed out. You start with a line summing up your book or an introductory to your plot, and then you follow it up with a, you know, hi, my name is Kayla, how you found them, why you're choosing them, why you want to work with them, just a little bit of an introductory so that they don't feel like you're just coming out of nowhere. And then you talk about your book as a product. I think one of the things that is the most difficult for creative people to do is to talk about their work as a product. I don't think that my query letters really got any traction until I started talking about it like I was trying to sell a refrigerator. Like, people want to know the specs. They want to know how shiny it is. They want to know who's going to buy it. They want to know what season it's going to be. They want to know if it has an ice filling machine. They want to know the details of the product. So you write what your genre is, what age group it is, what are the people who liked people like certain books might like your book, how many pages it is, how you initially think that it may sell, you know, that sort of thing. And then you write about yourself. You say, you know, this is who I am as a person. This is my accolades, what I, you know, did for a living, and this is why I want to write this book and everything. So I have a treat for you guys. I'm going to show you my query letter, the one that got me my agent at the time, who was Amy Tipton, who's since retired. I'm going to read it to you so you guys can see what a query letter that actually made it look like. This query letter is actually for my book, The Wicker King. Dear Amy Tipton, 17-year-old August Bateman definitely burned down the abandoned toy factory in the middle of the woods. He doused the entire thing in gasoline and vodka, then stood there as it went up in flames. And he is not sorry at all. The Wicker Throne, which was the original title of the book, is a harrowing tale of adventure and loss that follows August Bateman as he deals with his best friend Jack's spiral into madness. Both August and Jack's senior year of high school is rudely interrupted when Jack is struck with a degenerative hallucinatory disorder called peduncular hallucinosis, which plagues him with staggeringly vivid, long-term hallucinations. Jack's hallucinations take the form of an elaborate fantasy world where he's tasked with fulfilling a dark prophecy that holds the lives of every living thing in the balance, ending in flames that burn much more than just a building. The Wicker Throne is a young adult psychological thriller about a real disorder. It is complete at 45,000 words and is written in microfiction. The manuscript is meant to have illustrations and is designed to be read forward, then flipped upside down, and read backwards, which was a format that my agent rejected, and I had to reformat the entire book, but that's what was originally designed. I'm a writer for Media Diversified, a nonprofit literary magazine dedicated to analyzing and dismantling racism and sexism in UK media. I also run Kayla Apocalypse, which is my Tumblr at the time, a writing and publishing entertainment website that is subscribed to by Little Brown and Company, Pegasus Books, Simon & Schuster, Chronicle Books, To Gather, Upper Rubber Boot, and several other individuals and businesses in the industry. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Kayla Ancrum. So the first slide was just the general pitch. This is my story. These are my boys. This is how I write. This is how I can do suspense with the he's not sorry at all, and really drawing the agent into the lore of the Wicker King. And then this is just what the book is. This is how it's designed. This is how it looks. And the last paragraph is, hey, I'm a college student, so I don't really have a job, but I work for a nonprofit, and they like what I've got to say. And also I have a Tumblr, and the Tumblr is followed by some businesses. So please take me seriously. Sometimes, even if you don't have, oh, I wrote for this literary magazine and I got published in all these little cool places, you can still say things about yourself, but let them know that you love writing and that you care about publishing and you care about the industry and that you have things to say and that people care about your work and they care about your work. So, even if you've got a little bit of a barrier there in regards to professional experience, you can still think of things to say that sound impressive and important. All right, so which option should you pick? So as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the presentation, different options work for different books. This is a commercial industry. Your work may thrive with different publishing options. I think it's important that if you're at all interested in doing traditional publishing, you start with traditional publishing and work your way down. Traditional publishing, it doesn't cost any money to send query letters to agents. It doesn't cost anything but time and heartache to send things to agents. So before you invest any money in self-publishing or invest, anything in marketing or anything like that, try traditional publishing, send some letters out there, see what kind of feedback you get. At the very least, you'll know what people think about your work. At the very best, you'll get to go on this journey and, receive this experience of doing traditional publishing. Also, you can still get an agent, even if you aren't interested in traditional publishing. They still do all the things for you as they would for a traditional publisher. They can help you negotiate indie publishing contracts or find adaptation opportunities for your work. There are some people who did self-publishing and their self-published books were really, really well received and people loved them and they sold thousands and thousands of copies. And they got an agent. They didn't, then go on the process of traditional publishing. They just use their agent to see if they can get audiobook rights or see if they can get, better printing, costs, see if they could get, like a film or TV adaptation or something like that. And, what was that book? It was, there's a book that was written by, I think, Christopher Paolini, who did the Dragon book series, where his family self-published these books for him. And, I think it was Aragon or something. Yeah, so so there's a long time ago, ancient young adult fiction book. But yeah, he did something similar. So if he could do it, it's an available option. A lot of people wonder how long it takes, and I do not have a solid answer for you because it varies. For some people, it's very, very quick. I call these Cinderella story people. Where they, send out queries and in the first couple weeks, an agent is just like, I must have your work. But that's like 1 in a million, basically. That's not everybody. The average is 5 months to 2 years. For me personally, I queried a different book for 6 months. And then my agent at the time, Amy, was like, this book, your writing is good. You're an interesting person. You're a cool girl. But I don't know if this will sell. If you write anything else, send it to me. I sent her The Wicker King and she signed me a week later. So it's generally like that. A lot of my friends in the industry, they queried for a year or 2 years, maybe 3 years, and they finally had something bite. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes your work is amazingly written, beautifully drafted, poignant story that's just, we need stuff like that but it is coming out during a period of time in the publishing industry where that topic is not popular. For example, I was really, really interested in writing a book about like angels, but having them, instead of it being like a Christian book, it'd be a book about like angels as like monsters and like going into like fantasy history and stuff like that. And my editor was like, you can't publish something right now about that because there's something going on in the industry with Christian fiction that wouldn't allow your book to be marketed as a non-religious published book, basically. So sometimes you just have to wait, and it has nothing to do with you, and has something to do with what's going on in the industry, and those I call extended stays. There are people who waited 10, 15 years to have their book published, and they were good writers and good authors the whole time. And when their time came, the industry opened up for them like a flower. So I think that it's important to keep trying and, persist. One of the hardest things to do in this industry is to believe in yourself and to believe in your work, especially when things go really slowly. Publishing industry is not fast. It's not like, getting a job or winning a contest. It's absolutely a marathon. And believing that the stories that you have to tell are important and are worth everyone's time and are worthwhile to be read by your audience is something that's worth working on and worth maintaining. Being able to talk about your work to people who care about you, even if you don't have to tell them the details of your story, just tell them about how you're having a hard time, is really important. Finding a community that you can rely on when you're feeling down about your work is really important. If you go on to my Tumblr, which is just kaylapocalypse@tumblr.com, and you go really, really far back into the history and search writing or the Wicker King, you can see me talking about how I wanted to stop writing, and you can see me talking about how worried I am about my own work and how I don't know if anybody's going to want to read it. And at the time there were like, I think 2 books out about men and guys, and I was like, there's no market for this, like I just don't want to. And then people would come out of the woodwork and be like, keep trying, keep going, your stuff is good, I think you can make it, and having that community was something that really helped push me going. So I think it's important to, believe in yourself, and then also to be persistent. Just because you've tried sending out 30 query letters to the fanciest agents at the, biggest houses, for your beautiful, gorgeous book that you wrote, and all of them said no, doesn't mean that traditional publishing is crap and that, they're all hacks or anything like that. It just means that you need to send a little bit more, or look for some different people, or, maybe step down to indie publishing, or step over to self-publishing, or, maybe work on seeing if you can change some things about your work to make it more marketable. And, sometimes people love you and they love what you can do, but they think that the book that you've written isn't exactly great. And there are people who are really, really famous in the industry who wrote books that just weren't marketable concepts. And then they're, whoever they approached about it was like, hey, maybe you should write this kind of book instead, and then bought it immediately. And it's definitely worth, actively persisting at the same time as you're believing in yourself. And I know it sounds like lip service, and I know it sounds like, basic advice that you can get anywhere, but when you're in the trenches and you're really faced with the despair of whether or not you're going to be able to achieve your dream, remembering that I said these things might be able to carry you